Hi everyone, this is Kylie from Stampers Workshop. Today I'm going to show you the really cool bokeh technique. Hopefully that's pronounced correctly. I'm using the Happiest of Birthdays stamp set, the Scalloped Contours die set, as well as the Layering Circles die set. I'm also going to be doing a lot of sponging. I use the blending brushes for the base and then the sponge dauber to add the technique. Okay, to start with, I'm just going to basically create a template. So pick out a couple of different sized circles, run it through your die cutting machine, and that's going to be our stencil. Now you can use acetate if you want it to be a little bit longer lasting, but the paper you can use it a few times before it gets all manky and you need to throw it out. The three colours I'm using for my background are Melon Mambo, Pumpkin Pie and Highland Heather. I've chosen these colours because I'm actually making this card for the Stampin' Pals challenge for May 2021. For the challenge you can also add a neutral like basic black, basic white or very vanilla, and that will just depend on how you're designing your card. So grab your blending brushes, or if you don't have blending brushes, you can use your sponge daubers, stamping sponges, whatever you have to add a layer of colour. There's a couple of things you should take into consideration when you're doing this step. One is how heavily you ink up your tool. In general, try and tap it off on the side on some scratch paper so you don't end up with a big harsh mark on your work. If you can, start from off the edge of the paper. It just helps the transition and the softness. But every now and again you can say that I've got big blotches and stuff and it really won't matter. Another thing to consider is how the colours mix. So if you've got a couple of colours that mix quite well, and that'll look really pretty. But if you've got a couple of colours that mix and you end up with a brown or a grey and you're really not after that effect, just be really delicate when you put them next to each other. And I kind of had to do that a bit with the Highland Heather and the Pumpkin Pie, so I didn't get this muddy browny grey thing. Okay, let's go on to the next step. Now you're going to use those templates that we created earlier. Grab your Whisper White pigment ink and your sponge dauber and position the template over your panel. Now you could heat dry or leave the base panel to dry before you go to this next step. You can see as I was doing it, my white in spots sort of went a creamy orangey colour, and I sort of just tried to tap that off on the side. It didn't change how good this card looks, but if you want it to be more of a white look, then you might consider drying it. You still might have some mixing of the white with the colours underneath, but you might get that brighter white. So you can see some of them I'm really tapping in the white ink and getting it quite bold, and then I've thought to myself, oh actually I think that's a little too white, and so I've sort of blended it in and really softened it out. And you can see already how pretty this card base is starting to look. It's such a fantastic technique, and as you can see it's really easy to do as well. You don't need anything too complicated, you just have to add some circles of colour. The other thing is, as you can see here, the sponge dauber itself is actually a circle, so it's easy to get another size of these white dots purely by adding it into your pigment ink and then stamping on your piece of paper. I think it looks pretty as it is, but you can fiddle around, you can do it in other colorways, whatever you like. Just be careful too. The pigment ink is a very wet, sticky ink. It takes a long time to dry. So as you're moving around and lifting up your templates, just be really careful that you don't smudge your ink. I ended up with white ink all over my fingers. Now that just could be me, but just be careful. Fortunately, I just keep a rag by my craft desk. So when I realise that I'm covered in ink, I sort of give them a wipe off and hopefully don't ruin too many projects. Now you can see here, because it is that slow drying pigment ink, I'm not adding any embossing powder, which you could do if you wanted to. I haven't tried that with this technique, but you could certainly give it a try. Let me know how it goes. So I I wanted to keep going with my project, so I used my heat tool to dry it off, and then I've set it aside, and now we're adding the sentiment. As I said, I'm using that beautiful big Wishing You the Happiest of Birthdays stamp set, as stamps from the Happiest of Birthdays stamp set. I'm stamping it onto vellum. My tip for this too is, once you've added, I like to get my embossing powder ready before I start stamping, but as soon as I've applied it to my stamped image, I pack it up, put it away, so you minimize the risk of getting that everywhere. Because trust me, I have actually done that before. So learn from my mistakes. Once I finish doing that, don't you love how it shines? It looks so good, doesn't it? I'm grabbing one of the Scalloped Contours borders and just making it fit round. You can use whatever size you like, or what frame you like. I just thought that was a really cool one. I'm going to just chop it out, send it through my die cutting machine, and now I've got this really great sentiment. And the reason I chose to stamp it on vellum was so that I could put it onto my card and still have that pretty technique show through. Because you've gone to all that effort and it looks so good, you kind of don't want to cover it up. And I could have used a smaller sentiment, but I haven't used that one before and I was just dying to do so. So what I did now, I was just cutting down that panel just a little bit so that I had a bit of white showing through from behind. It's just a basic white cardstock. I positioned the panel over it. Now you can, as I said, move that wherever you want it to be. I thought some nice white twine would look great, and I'm doing the cheats way of doing it. Instead of sort of wrapping it around and tying it myself, this is the way to do it if you don't know how to. Oops, hang on, I forgot to tell you this step. Because you can see adhesive generally through vellum, what I tend to do is add my adhesive on the bits that can't see through. So in this case, I'm adding little dots of adhesive, and I did that all over the entire panel, all of where you can see the stamped image, all of the back of that, I've added little dots of adhesive, and that is enough to hold it. So you can see this is my little cheat that I was telling you about. I've just taped where I want it to go, and
make the bows the size that you want.
Because sometimes when I'm
trim off the length
tying
of
my
those
bows and
excess
things, I tie
you
too
can have them a
tightly,
little
or I
bit
get
longer,
creases,
and
and
a little bit shorter,
whatever you
my
like.
cheats
Way of doing it. So
it's looking so good already, isn't it?
Wrapped it
So
around
grab your
adhesive, then I've just cut a length
to attach it.
I tend to
your
sort of
card base.
cut
You
too
can have a
much
top folding
because then I
card,
get to
side
fiddle
folding
with
card, whatever you
how
like.
much I want. I usually
How big I
actually
want
do
the bow to
so
be
that it
here.
opens up, but this
You
time
can
I've
then
done it so
secure
it
this
opens
with a
from the
glue
side.
dot if you
That's for
want.
something
I
a little
didn't
bit
bother.
different. The final step is to add some bling. Now you don't need to, but I thought some clear bling. I've used the elegant faceted gems. I thought that would be just a nice way to sort of tie in with that sort of round circular look of the background, and just add a final touch that looked a little bit pretty. And that's the card for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll give it a go. If you need any of the products, you can find them in my online store. Links are below or on my blog at stampersworkshop.com. Thanks for watching. Bye.